Ooh, welcome back, Weirds and Weebidoos, to the channel Division Doge, but today I'm going to be covering Overwatch 2 a little bit, sort of. Okay, this is a more casual video. It's unscripted, although I have already done a run-through of this. I decided to re-record it just because the last one got a little long, even though I thought what I said was good. Essentially, I just want to talk about Overwatch 2, because I feel like there's a lot to talk about, and it's going to be hard for me to stay on topic if I get into an actual game, because, you know, there's a lot of distracting things going on. So most of the footage here is just going to be me either looking at people in the hero gallery, or me just going through them in the training range to show you stuff. But rest assured, you're going to be seeing a whole bunch of new stuff. Now, I understand that there's probably not that many people in my audience who are already Overwatch fans, I guess, because it's not the kind of content I make usually, but, well, what can I say? It's just one of my favourite games right now, and I just tend to make videos on whatever I'm really enjoying. So yeah, now, the reason why I really wanted to make this video is because, to be honest, you probably noticed that in the general kind of wider, just, I guess, quote-unquote, gaming community, Overwatch 2 has not been very well received. It's been getting constant kind of bad press and all that, and it's really frustrating for me because I'm actually really happy with Overwatch 2, but I completely understand where it comes from. So I kind of just want to make this video for anyone who's just kind of looking at all the shit that's being said about it and just like, what happened here? How did it end up like this? For me to explain why it's ended up the way it is and why I actually think that this is promising compared to what could have happened. And I actually have a lot of hope for the game to get better over time. So yeah, first things first, the one thing that everyone's probably been hearing about is this. Yes, Overwatch now has a battle pass, and yes, Overwatch 2 replaced Overwatch 1, so Overwatch 1 is gone now. So yeah, a lot of people were complaining about this battle pass.
Low tech. We all die in the end.
Thank you, Anna, very cool. A lot of people have been complaining about the fact that the game has a battle pass now, and I would think that was completely valid if it weren't for one thing. As you're probably already aware, Overwatch 2 is now free. Instead of paying £60 for this game, you get it for free. You just need the battle pass if you want cosmetics. So here's the thing. Considering literally everything in the battle pass except this is just cosmetics, and this is to unlock a brand new hero, but this is in the free battle pass, not the premium battle pass, so you can get this for free just by playing the game, I really do not... Well, I do understand the criticism for the Battle Pass, but I don't think it's actually very well informed. Because here's the thing. People want Overwatch to receive constant updates throughout its life. That is one big problem people had with Overwatch 1, is back when Echo released back in, 2018, there was just 3 years of basically no content where they were working on Overwatch 2, which was awful for the game and was killing it. Now, people want the game to return to regular updates and regular new content, but at the same time, the game's got to have some kind of model to continue making money throughout its lifetime for that to work. It can't just be like Overwatch 1 where you buy the game once and that's it, because if that was the case, they're not really going to be incentivized to keep updating a game they're not making any money off of. I actually think this system is completely fine, because the thing is, this is, as I say, all cosmetic, except this, which again is part of the free version of the Battle Pass and always will be. Now, people have been making a big noise about the fact that this is all the way at level 55 on the Battle Pass. I'll give them that. I do think this is a bit higher than it should be. I think that somewhere in the 20s or 30s would be much more reasonable. But here's the thing. 55 is not going to be that hard to reach. Every single tier in this Battle Pass requires the same amount of experience to reach, so I don't think it's going to be much of a problem, considering, the game's only been out, is it nearly 2 weeks? I actually haven't been keeping track of time. What day is it today? Yeah, so nearly 2 weeks it's been out, and I'm already at level 45. And to put that in perspective, this is this Battle Pass, as you can see, I got 51 days still. I did this much in 12 or 13. So, yeah, I would say as long as you're playing regularly. I don't even think you'd have to play every day. Just as long as you're playing pretty regularly. I mean, I haven't been playing every day. I've been playing most days. then yeah, you can definitely get this hero before they go. I think you don't have to be worried of missing out on new heroes because you didn't get them in the battle pass. If there was like a whole like 2-month long period where, I don't know, you were on holiday or something and you didn't manage to play Overwatch. And don't get me wrong, I do realize that's annoying, but remember that what we get because we have the battle pass is for the entire game to be free for anyone to play now, which I think is wonderful. I think that's great. Just a little detail I forgot to add as well is that you'll see some people saying that the battle pass is something stupid like £1,200 or whatever. That comes from a pretty stupid mischaracterization of how it works. It costs something like £8.70 or something like that, at least in British money, and American I'm pretty sure it's just $10 exactly. And they only get that ridiculous number from if you didn't want to actually play to unlock stuff and you will try to skip ahead. It's on purpose made to be pretty inefficient. You would only really want to skip ahead, like maybe one tier if the battle pass is like at the end and you haven't got like that tier. You can like buy that tier. So that's like assuming you bought all 80 tiers, didn't play at all that month, and then also bought the battle pass, which is kind of stupid. You know, you wouldn't do that. But yeah, so that's the battle pass. Other people are very frustrated with the lack of new content in Overwatch 2. Which I can understand, I suppose, but I also think is a little bit short-sighted. So if we look at the hero gallery here, right now Bastion has temporarily been removed due to a bug, so that's why he's not here, but other than that, these are all the characters. Now, you might notice that it depends. If you haven't been playing Overwatch recently, there's a good chance that some of you haven't played Overwatch since like 2017 or 2016 or something, in which case you might be thinking, well, what's wrong here? That's a lot of characters. But if you had played as recently as 2019 or 2018 or whatever, you might notice that there are actually only 3 brand new characters in Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2. Now here's the thing. Lots of people have been making a massive stink about this, that there's only 3 new characters after all this time. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that 3 is a little bit of a small amount, but there's 2 big things I need to bring up here. For one, Team 4, the development team behind Overwatch, is kind of cornered with Overwatch. The thing is, they didn't want to make Overwatch 2. Well, this isn't like outright confirmed, because of course this is all inside industry stuff, but there's been leaks and stuff, and I fully believe this kind of thing. It sounds like what happened was Activision owns Blizzard, and Blizzard of course owns the developers of Overwatch Team 4. And Activision was putting pressure on Blizzard to make a sequel to Overwatch when they didn't want to, because they looked at COD and they're like, well, look, Call of Duty has a sequel every new year and like we make lots of money off of that. Overwatch is a shooter game, let's do that. Yeah, considering the other kind of allegations that have been put against how stupidly run Activision is, I wouldn't be surprised if the higher-ups were that tone-deaf about the kind of game Overwatch is. So, considering they were being made to make a sequel when clearly Overwatch didn't need a sequel, their original plan was to do something very different with Overwatch 2, and just take the opportunity to do something new and unique with the fact that they're kind of being pressured into making a sequel. They were going to make the game PvE focused, and they were going to make it so that every character in the game got multiple new abilities that were only for the PvE mode. But then, that was taking way too long to make. They originally did not plan to release Overwatch 2 until the PvE was ready, but it's not going to be ready until 2023. And at this point, we've been waiting 3 years with basically no new content. So I think it was absolutely the right call to release Overwatch 2 at this time, because it saved the community. Like, even the people who are massive fans of Overwatch 2 were finally hitting the point where there was basically nothing left for them to do in Overwatch 1. And we desperately needed new content. So this really couldn't have come any later. People say that, oh, we were getting, you know, a new hero every 4 months before, and it's been 3 years. Where are the 9 new heroes in Overwatch 2? And I'm not gonna lie, this always seemed like a really stupid thing to think in my head. Considering the pandemic happened, considering Activision's awful mismanagement of, like, Blizzard and Team 4 and all that, considering all the shit they've had to put up with, I am not at all surprised that they haven't been able to make 9 heroes, 9 new heroes in the time that they've been gone, especially considering, again, most of that time has been put into the PvE and expanding on abilities for old heroes rather than actually adding new heroes. Now, don't get me wrong, all that said, it doesn't mean that you can't be disappointed there's only 3 new characters. Because, in fairness, even I was expecting 4 to 5, so I'm kind of caught off guard there was only 3. But, in fairness, I actually think it is quite good for the game that there isn't that many new characters, which might come as a shock, but let me put it this way. I've played Paladins. Now, I don't know if you know Paladins. It was a game that got popular a bit ago because it was a quote-unquote Overwatch ripoff, but it was actually pretty fun to say it was an Overwatch ripoff and pretty well made. Paladins is in a bad state right now. Now, why am I pivoting to Paladins? Because Paladins is what happens when you just keep adding new characters and don't address real issues with the game. Which is why I'm happy that we only got 3 new characters, but Overwatch 2 addressed way more issues with the fundamental gameplay of Overwatch to compensate. In Paladins, there are what? I actually don't even know anymore, but I think around 60 characters to pick. And there is a lot of variety and they can be quite fun, but the game itself is bugged to hell and back, performs really poorly, has a lot of server issues. Basically every single season it's got some new game-breaking bug that the developers don't put any effort into fixing, and instead they put more time into making another new character. And yeah, I don't want Overwatch to turn into that. As much as I'm throwing shade at Paladins, I do enjoy Paladins as well, but yeah, I really hope Overwatch doesn't go down that path, and this is why I find it actually kind of promising only 3 new characters were added, because let's be real, how many do we really need? As I say, I think that 4 or 5 would have been better, but people are saying there should be like 9 new characters. Do you think that would actually go down well? Like, keep in mind, there are going to be a lot of people who haven't even seen characters like Echo and Sigma, even though they were from Overwatch 1, because a lot of people, I think most Overwatch players left around the time that Brig was added, so yeah, there's a lot of characters here that aren't even from Overwatch 2 that are going to be quote-unquote brand new, at least to most people coming back to the game. It's going to be really overwhelming if half the roster is characters they don't recognize to new players. So yeah, I do think that maybe more than 3 would have been nice, but I'm not complaining too much. The other reason I'm not complaining is because the 3 characters that got added, Junker Queen, Sojourn, and Kiriko, I've got to say, are some of the most fun characters I've ever seen in Overwatch. These are amazingly designed, and I would certainly prefer well-designed, extremely fun to play, and fair and balanced heroes over more heroes being added to the game like Roadhog, more heroes being added like, well, Baptiste. I know that one's a bit more of a controversial one. I don't think Baptiste is necessarily quote-unquote broken, but I think he's very fundamentally unfun. I don't like the way he's designed at all. I would much prefer that they keep this up, even if it means there's a slower pace of hero releases, that they keep up these extremely well-made heroes that don't throw off the balance of the game and that everyone loves playing as. Well, I say that, Sojourn is currently kind of busted, but in a way that is very flashy and very cool and very skill-like demanding, so I think that not too many people have a problem with Sojourn being good, although, yeah, she probably needs nerfs at some point. All that said, even if I say, like, oh, I wouldn't even mind if they had a slower pace of hero releasing, this is the other reason why I think Overwatch 2 is going to be promising. Because we are going to be getting a constant stream of new content again, which we haven't had in, like, 3 years, as I said. I say we. I gotta admit, I stopped playing Overwatch around the time that Brig released, as I said, just like most people, I think. And after that, I came back to it in early April this year, when I rebought it on PC. And one of the reasons, as well as that I really want to defend Overwatch 2 is because I see so many people, even before Overwatch 2 came out, even with Overwatch 1, talking about, oh, Overwatch is just so bad now. It was so much better back in 2016. Oh my god, the game was so much better. And I've got to say, I completely disagree. As someone who played during then, when I came back to play this game in April, I loved it. It was so much better than I had ever experienced playing it back on console in the early days. It was awful back then, at least for me, because that was back before they implemented role queue, which again, if any of you have not played Overwatch in so long, you don't even know about this. They added something called role queue now, where essentially, before you go into a game, you have to say whether you want to play tank, damage, or support. And once you get into that game, you can swap to any character you want in that category, but if I'm playing a support, I can't swap to a damage. And that's to make sure that the teams stay balanced. In Overwatch 1, that would be 2 tanks, 2 damage, 2 support. However, in Overwatch 2, it's now 5v5, so it's 1 tank, 2 damage, 2 support. We'll get back to that, because that's another can of worms. Anyway, so yeah, That's the big thing I hear people complain about is, oh my god, roll Q killed the game. I can only imagine these people are DPS players who never realized the misery they were inflicting on the rest of their team by being a hot-headed DPS player who didn't care a single bit about what the rest of the team needed. Because, my god, as someone who likes to play support, being in constant games of having 5 DPSs on my team and being the only support with no tank to protect me, as Anna on console was miserable. And I absolutely have way more fun with the game now that roll queue is a thing, and it's limited to 2 DPS per team. I always know I'm going to have someone else to help with the support, and and at least a tank to help defend myself with. That just makes the game so much better. And even if you really want to go back to before roll queue was a thing, there it is, open queue. Go play it if you want. It seems weird to me that people keep complaining about how roll queue killed the game when open queue is literally right here and you don't play it. It almost makes me think they know how garbage the game is without roll queue, but they don't want to admit it. Because no one plays open queue. Well, I say no one. You can get games pretty fast, but I don't think anyone who takes the game like seriously and plays it all the time plays open queue. I think more casuals play open queue. I mean, no shade if you do play open queue. It can be fun, but like in terms of long-term, I don't know. It's not the most balanced mode, not the most, a bit more, quite frustrating to play depending on what you get on your team. Yeah, anyway, getting a little bit sidetracked there. So yeah, Overwatch 2, I will admit, does not have many differences from Overwatch 1. I'm fully aware of that, and I'm not going to say that isn't the case. However, I've got to say, I don't think that's that much of a problem. I think Overwatch 1 is just genuinely a really fun game, and all it needs is a steady stream of new content, and it will stay fun. The main reason it got unfun towards the end of Overwatch 1's life is because there was no new content coming in, besides small balance updates and bug fixes. Overall, Overwatch 2 mostly just makes the game look a bit better, run a bit smoother. It actually runs at 144 FPS for me now. Before, for whatever reason, it was stuck at 87 FPS, even when I told it to go above 87. And I didn't think it was a PC issue, I don't think it should be, but either way, now it's able to do a clean 144.
That one's confirmed.
Game just generally plays a bit smoother. It's kind of hard to say, because apparently they haven't changed the tick rate of the servers, but I've seen a lot of players, and I feel this too, so I don't think it's placebo since so many people seem to be experiencing this. A lot of people are saying that they feel like they're landing their shots more often, and like it just simply feels better to aim and shoot, which, yeah, I definitely feel that. They've definitely done something. I'm not sure what they've done, but they've done something and it feels good. One thing I completely forgot to mention there as well, and I'm kind of surprised, is a feature which I actually think is long overdue in Overwatch.
Tango spotted. Got eyes on an enemy. Hostile here.
So now, with middle mouse click by default, which I actually think is a garbage button for it, if you've got any kind of gaming mouse, quote-unquote, with extra buttons, bind it to one of your kind of side buttons, which is what I've done. I've got it on my mouse 5 button. But either way, if you press that button, you can ping an enemy, and your entire team can see where they are, how far away they are, what enemy they are, and even if it's a moving enemy, I don't think I'm going to get a good example here. Actually, maybe I will, because it's a trailing range, but there we go.
Tango spotted.
It moves with them until you can't see them anymore, and it stops there with the question mark to say that's the last time they were seen, which is really nice. There is some auto-aim on it, maybe a bit too much sometimes, as you can see.
Tango
a lot of the time I do accidentally ping the wrong thing because it auto-aims so hard. I do wish it was tuned down a little bit, but overall it's kind of good it's got that much auto-aim to it because, you know, it's just pinging, it's not shooting. And it would be annoying if there's like a tracer and you want to tell your teammates they're there and they're blinking all around and you're trying to ping them and you can't do it. So yeah, this is actually a really big change. It allows people who don't use mics to actually communicate really well in Overwatch just by using, like, you know, the communication things just in the game. And I've been using it a hell of a lot. I just made a habit of just, like, any time I see practically any enemy that I know the rest of the team I can't see, just ping them.
Eyes on an enemy.
I don't ping the hell out of literally everyone. I'm not spamming it, but it is very useful because it means that you can, for instance, let your teammates know what enemies are on the enemy team. If you're right at the start of the game, you might not know what the enemy team even has. Well, if I run up and I just see the Zarya or something and I ping them, and like, I'm the first one there, everyone knows that they're about to get a fight with Zarya. It's really nice, actually. Genuinely, it does feel like I'm able to communicate way better without using my mic, which is just really good for things like quick play and all that. And as well as that, basically every single character in the game has received some changes. Now, in fairness, these aren't necessarily major changes, especially a lot of the DPS only got some small changes. But the only character in the entire roster who has received no changes is Genji, who even then has, in a weird indirect way, received a massive change, in the fact that at the end of Overwatch 1's meta, he was actually garbage, despite being such a high skill ceiling hero, which a lot of people found miserable. And now, he's suddenly become one of the best DPSs in the game, not even due to any changes to him, really, more just due to changes in the context of how Overwatch is played as a whole. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about the whole one tank thing right now, because this needs some explaining. There have been some people who are very, very mad about the fact there's only one tank in the game. And I will say this, my honest opinion on whether having one tank is better than two is, I think it's definitely more fun for the tank player. I think it can be less fun for the support players, and I suppose sometimes the DPS, but usually the DPS is kind of doing their own thing, so not so much. So yeah, I think this is more an issue where I don't think that two tanks was bad, and I think that both of them had their merits, but I do think overall one tank is an improvement. So why did they change it to one tank? Well, frankly, no one, and I mean no one, wants to play tank in Overwatch 1. Now, you might be caught off guard by that, because, at least in my experience, it seems like there's more people who like playing tank than there are people who like playing support. I thought support would be the least popular. But no, it's tank, and the reason why is because in Overwatch 1, playing tank was just begging to be a damage sponge. And that might not be so shocking to you to hear at the moment, but when you get to higher levels of play, playing tank just becomes miserable. Because you would essentially just be eating stun after stun after stun. I mean, it was a meme in the Overwatch 1 community. It was the main tank experience. If you jumped in as Winston, or well, not even necessarily Winston, but Winston's a good example. You jumped onto an enemy team as Winston with a whole plan of how to get out without dying, with your bubble, with all your cooldowns, with your ult. And then you find yourself getting flashbanged by McCree, then frozen by Mei, then sleep darted by Anna, and then, I don't know, bashed by Brig. And then by the time you're even able to press a button on your keyboard, you've already been dealt 7,000 damage and have been vaporized from the game. And it's like, it feels miserable. Because you didn't make a mistake there. You jumped in, you had a whole plan of how to get out. They just had so many stuns that they could deal an infinite amount of damage to you and there was nothing you could do to survive. Now, of course, that isn't literally every game, but it happens a lot as tank. Because you're an enormous, easy-to-hit target for everyone to stare at and just pump all their damage into. Which makes you absolutely begging to be hit with CC, or stuns, or anything like that. Any kind of stun, if you're an enormous target like a tank, I mean, look at me. I'm begging to be stunned right now. So, people found that a lot of the time playing tank, their job was mostly just to eat stuns and eat tons of damage and just take all that shit and not be able to do anything about it. It just felt miserable playing tank in Overwatch 1 over time. And as I said that I was a support player, it's kind of evenly split for me between tank and support. Those are the two roles I play a whole lot. It used to be I played mostly support, but it got to the point where there were so few people playing tank that I was starting to get a lot of brand new players as tanks on my teams, which was obviously really bad. So I started having to play tank to compensate, because we would just lose like so many games if I continued to play support, because we'd always have at least one tank who was like brand new to the game and had no idea what they were doing, because just that few people wants to play tank. So yeah, tank desperately needed fixing. What did they do to fix it in Overwatch 2? I gotta say, they did a pretty good job, which is again another reason why I actually want to defend Overwatch 2. Because I gotta say, as someone who plays a lot of tank, I love tanks in Overwatch 2, and it seems that most people do, because often tank is the longest queue time, as in the most people want to play tank. Now, in fairness, there now are half the people who can play tank, so I suppose technically there's still more people who want to play DPS, but I mean, what else is new? Everyone always wants to play DPS the most. So yeah, tank is a lot more fun now there's one of them, because you as the one tank have a lot of pressure on you, because now you're the only tank, you have to be doing all the defending, the peeling, the pushing into enemy space and making space, all of that for your team alone. But to do that, every single tank in the game got major buffs to the point where they're now intentionally designed to be stronger than a normal DPS or support. And as well as that, every single character in the game who had a stun has, for the most part, had their stuns removed, which means having a tank now, being a tank, is much less miserable. Because when you charge in, you still get pelted with bullets, but you can survive that because you're a tank, and you know, I've got a giant shield, and I've got armor, and I've got all this health and all that. And now you don't get frozen, you don't get flashbanged, you don't get shield bashed, you don't constantly get interrupted in what you're trying to do, and constantly stunned. So, are stuns completely gone? Well, sort of. They are, for the most part, gone. There are some characters where that just can't be done. I was the most surprised that they did actually have the balls for Cassidy, or McCree, as most people know him. His name got changed to Cassidy. Very long story. They kind of had to do it. Long story. Yeah, McCree used to be able to flashbang people, as I'm sure you'd remember, and it was his most iconic move. And since it was so iconic, I thought they'd never get rid of it. But I actually did want them to get rid of it, and I think most people did. It was really annoying dealing with flashbangs in Overwatch 1, and it was way too easy a way to instantly win a duel. But now, they actually removed his flashbang and gave him this instead. Magnetic grenade.
You'll need more
So yeah.
grit than that.
That's just one example. But an example of someone who did keep their stun is Anna. Well, I say stun, sleep.
Leave a broken world behind.
You can't really get rid of Anna's sleep dart. She kind of needs that. So she still has sleep dart. And as well as that, any stun that is extremely brief, like only lasts half a second, like Sigma's rock. I just realized, why did I kill them? Show now you don't see the rock stun. Whatever. let me try that one again. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so since that stun's only half a second, they're alright with very brief stuns like that. So yeah, playing tank is a whole lot less miserable now in general, which is good news, of course. Now, what's the problem then? Why are people complaining about there being one less tank? Well, it's a couple things. There are definitely some valid complaints, but I do feel like a lot of it is just kind of anger at new thing. So, the one thing that I think is very valid is a lot of people are saying that it's changed for the sake of change, just so they can say that this is different from Overwatch 1. And I will say, I do think that's probably partially true. But I also think it genuinely did solve the real problems with tank in Overwatch 1. And that's not something to scoff at. I think that's an amazing thing. It's made the game permanently a lot better to play. And hopefully it's going to stay that way. So, yeah, that's good. And the other thing that is a complaint is that you might have heard of something called an off tank and a main tank. Now, this isn't official, of course. They're just tanks officially. But in any kind of community of Overwatch who plays a decent amount, they would know some tanks as main tanks and some tanks as off tanks. Main tanks are the ones that make space, like Reinhardt. If you're going to have to capture an enemy point, Reinhardt's probably going to be at the front line. He's going to be holding up his shield. He's going to be walking forward. If he gets a chance, he might hit his way in and start screwing him up. So yeah, that's a main tank. Reinhardt's probably the simplest example of a main tank. But then there's off tanks. A good example of an off tank, probably the example of an off tank really, is Roadhog. Because when you look at Roadhog, he really feels more like a DPS than a tank. And that's kind of true. But being an off tank doesn't just mean that you have better DPS. In fact, it's possible to be an off tank who has worse DPS than a main tank. Being an off tank means that instead of making space, because it's not like Hog can usually just charge right into a point alone and expect to take it, he does have a lot of health and self-heal, but if there's enough people shooting at him, he will die. Instead, what he does is he follows behind the main tank, and he covers all the space that he's already taken. And then any time that an enemy tries to encroach into your space, usually to go after your supports, well, hook, boom, dead. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be hook, but you get what I mean. Off-tanks usually occupy the space that the main tanks make, and make sure that that space is safe for the other teammates who occupy that space, and if enemy tries to come into your space, you fuck them up. Another example of an off-tank would be Zarya, a more defensive example, in that she gives bubbles to her teammates, so if that's an Ana or whatever getting jumped by a Genji, that would save her and all that. And another example would be D.Va, who uses defense matrix, of course, to save people. So yeah. So that's what a main tank and an off tank is. Now, here's the problem. Now we only have one tank. Off tanks kind of don't exist anymore, sort of. You need to make space, because if you never make space, you'll never make it to the objective, you'll never push the payload, blah blah blah, so you'll never win the game. But if you're playing an off-tank, you're not made to make space. So you can see where this issue comes in, where it's like, huh, wait, how do we actually, you know, deal with this problem? How do we make it so that we have an off-tank and a main tank still? Well, that's the thing, actually. You kind of just don't have an off-tank now. You see, with the buffs that all the tanks have received, basically every character who's an off-tank in Overwatch 1 can now be played as a main tank. I say basically, Roadhog is still kind of rough as a main tank. You can only really get away with playing him as a main tank if you can just really land those hooks. Otherwise, you're gonna really struggle to make space. But aside from that, yeah, D.Va can definitely be played like a main tank now. She's definitely much more powerful at making space than she used to be. Zarya, I actually haven't played that much of, despite the fact that she's currently really good. I just haven't felt like playing her much because she didn't receive many changes. But it seems like now she can bubble herself twice, which is one of the changes she received. She can use both bubbles on whatever she wants, instead of having to use one on an ally and one on herself. I imagine that she's pretty good at making space now. So yeah, we now don't really have an issue of, you know, oh, we can't make space because we're an off-tank. But that means that now now the off-tank is making space, and now there is no second tank to defend your supports. Your supports are in a lot more trouble, because if they get jumped, well, the tank's the one in the front line, and they're kind of preoccupied. They can't really jump back and save you most of the time. And, you know, relying on the DPS to come save you, usually most DPS players have no idea what's going on with the rest of their team. They're just running off wherever they want to and starting duels with whoever they run into. So, you know, a lot of DPS players don't really look back at their supports and think, huh, maybe I should help out with that. So, yeah, this is the main issue with the fact of only having one tank, is that now there's a design shift where every single support in the game now has to be self-sufficient to be good. They have to be. If you're playing support and you're expecting to be saved in Overwatch 2, you're not going to get far. And I'm not saying that to be mean, that is just how it is. Like, tanks do not come to save you anymore unless they are really good, at which point they're carrying you. Now, that sounds pretty grim. You'd think that supports would be dead because of this. And in fact, in the first beta of Overwatch 2, they kind of were. But honestly, by the release of this game, I think they've done a really good job of compensating with the supports, and we'll get to that later. Because now, I want to as quickly as I can, and try not to ramble on too long, I want to go through every single character in this roster and what changes they've received. So let's start with D.Va.